Hello and welcome, everyone, to this edition of the podcast, the Two World Podcast. We are sitting in various places in the world in January of 2023 with some light snow and some grazing cattle outside of what I can see. We are here to discuss and give views on another episode of a show called Northern Exposure. But first, let me introduce the co-hosts of the Two World Podcast. We have...
I am Barney.
And I'm Jacob.
And we welcome everyone, and we hope you are entertained by this podcast.
Yeah, so I was kind of wondering, just to get started, if Barney could give us and the audience a little sense of what drew him to today's episode, maybe telling us again about the title and maybe just sharing a little bit about what stands out to him from the episode.
Yeah, I believe this is season 2, and the title is Slow Dance, and I'm looking forward to talking about the title, because this is maybe before the titles got maybe kind of clever in a way, but kind of still in the era when we can have fun, like looking into what the title means, what maybe the writers were thinking of when they gave it the title. I had recommended or thought about looking at this one a few times, mainly because of it introducing Ron and Eric, and I wanted us to have the chance to kind of meet all of the characters that aren't necessarily in every episode, but are in a few here and there. And this is a fun episode for seeing kind of the real, getting a real good feel of Maurice as a character. And then I had forgotten about the Shelley and Holling storyline, and I really appreciate that one in this episode, and maybe we can think about, maybe expand upon that, and maybe try and find some connections in our own lives, to kind of feeling in that kind of third wheel, or maybe regretfully making someone else feel in that experience that kind of situation. And of course, this is the one of the few episodes that Rick is in, Maggie's boyfriend, and we're kind of, I'm not sure if this is the first one where they mention the curse or not, but we get introduced to this kind of extended amount of tragedy that Maggie has had with boyfriends who have passed away. But I appreciate it. We don't see much of Ed in this one, but I kind of appreciate the characters as they're kind of in their own real kind of solid roles in this episode. And the best part, I think, is the end. It has I just finished watching the episode before we started this, and there's a lot of really nice things happening at the end, which, we can get to later. But the main reason I thought about this episode, right, was because of Ron and Eric and Maurice, and I also like the way that kind of Chris kind of shepherds Maurice along through this episode a little bit at various points, when Maurice is trying to find a moral compass, trying to handle the situation that he finds himself in with dealing with Ron and Eric. And how about you, Ken? What were any impressions that you had, or did anything stand out when I mentioned watching this episode? What were some of the first things that you thought of, or memories that you had of when before viewing the episode again?
Yeah, in the way back when, we are in the midst of season 2, so you're somewhat acquainted with the characters. I knew right away that Maurice would have a major struggle with Ron and Eric, just because of who they are. And I was then curious how the writers would portray the obvious conflict which would occur. And I thought they did a great job of being realistic about it. You'll remember one part where Maurice says, I had a moral compass when the price offered, and background for our viewers here, Maurice was trying to sell a place and Ron and Eric would turn it into a bed and breakfast. Maurice said, I had a moral compass when the price was at, say, $45,000. And now I don't seem to have such a moral compass when it's at $55,000. Knowing fully well there's not another buyer within 6,000 miles for this. Well done. I mean, this is what we expect from Maurice at this point. And as you said, Chris shepherded him along in a multitude of ways, and really was, I think, disturbing to Maurice when he brought up the point that the fact that see if I can remember exactly, the fact that you're so freaked out, or men are freaked out by homosexuals, is an indicator of a tendency on their part to perhaps be, in a small way, leaning that way. So,
yeah, it was interesting how interesting to see Maurice in this episode, because we kind of, I don't know, we wonder if maybe he's a shallow person or whatnot, and so it really goes with the character that he overreacts to them, to realizing that he has some of the same interests in these men who are gay, and then exactly, he tries to get rid of everything, tries to overcompensate maybe, and then Chris points out that maybe he's overreacting, maybe he should just rein it in a little bit. And we see Maurice in the throes of real conflict, because trying to justify himself that with the phrase about saying like a number of world-class chefs are notorious womanizers or something like that.
Justification.
Yeah. How about you, Jacob? How did you feel about this part of the storyline? And I'm curious, did it, because I still feel like this episode is so recent. It feels like it could be like an episode on TV now. I even think. But did you have in the back of your mind, were you wondering, when was this filmed? Was this like any kind of context as to what the audience might have been feeling the very first time that they watched this episode?
Yes, I did, Barney. With the opening that Chris gives during his DJ segment, he's talking about AI and the modern world in which we live. And when I think of the show being filmed in the 90s, I'm trying to remember back then if AI was something that I was even aware of. I remember seeing sci-fi movies, like Terminator 2, and being like scared of a potential future reality where AI robots could, threaten humanity. But AI as an existing tool that was being discussed and was present in society was not something that was on my radar back then. And now we have all of this conversation around, should AI be permitted to be used by students in their assignments with school, with the Chat GPT AI program that can generate text, and students can plug in parameters that it can help them, essentially create a body of text that they could submit or that they could adapt. And all these schools now are trying to address that. So anyways, to answer your question, when he starts talking about that in his DJ segment, I'm like, oh my goodness, it feels like it could totally be 2023 when he's saying that part of the segment. So that really drew me in. And I'm like, I always really focus on Chris's DJ segments in the intros, because it often has some philosophical bent that relates deeply to where the show's going. And so when he starts talking about that, I'm thinking, okay, how is this going to relate to technology and humans relating to technology? And so that drew me in. So I don't know if that answers your question, but That's kind of what
Mhm.
stood out to me at first. Well, and maybe we could also address before we started recording a question that Ken had. And Ken, you mentioned that later in the episode, Chris references an older science fiction movie. Would you be willing to share that question again?
Sure. And a part of what you just spoke of helps me to understand a little bit more of the context of how Chris was using it, except for one little piece, and I'll throw that out to both of you. Yeah, Chris references a 1951, I believe it was, movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still. The basic premise being a humanoid lands in a flying saucer in Washington, and is warning the human race on Earth. He would really love to gather all of the leaders of Earth to warn them that if we cannot live in peace and harmony here, that you'll be eliminated. And you'll be eliminated in the sense that where I live as a humanoid, we have a system of robots in place that if we have lost our sight and lost our way, they will destroy us because they are programmed to do so. Now, Chris says it seems like we are all heading toward becoming machines. I thought the reference might be more of a warning to us as humans rather than us becoming the robots. And maybe I misunderstood the intent of the writers at that point. So your take on that?
Well, and maybe I would love to hear too, Barney, do you see a connection between those references and what happens with the satellite? I don't know if you would see any connection there or not.
Yeah, it's interesting having the chance to discuss this with you. I think that I had always overlooked that that comment, the depth of that comment. I think that maybe I just subconsciously or just just enjoying the episode kind of wrote it off as an extension of what he says, how Rick is was kind of leading the way, being fused with the satellite as like one of the first people to branch into this android, humanoid, robot person mix. But when I hear it in the context of the movie and what the message of the movie is, and now I can see kind of an overarching meaning for the whole show, especially kind of acknowledging, I guess in 91, maybe, people are starting to, I think maybe we haven't yet had the debate about don't ask, don't tell, things like that, but it feels like the issue of homosexuality is gaining more, people are becoming more willing to talk about the issue and are debating, are wondering what impact it has on society, and people are struggling with this. If it felt like, as I remember, kind of the world happening around me at that time when I was, still in junior high. But I think that maybe the underlying message, maybe we can think about and extrapolate, is that our society is trying to find a way to, instead of drawing lines and drawing defenses and taking sides and whatnot, that maybe we better watch ourselves and instead find a way to live peacefully together. And the interesting thing is that Maurice and Ron and Eric really do find a way to live peacefully together, even though they're completely on the opposite end spectrums of ideologies in a number of ways. And I wonder if maybe that, in context of the main message of the movie, if that's something the writers intentionally thought of, and maybe the satellite and talking about Rick was a way to work that in there. I don't know how many people were aware of that movie when they were watching it, but I'm sure that the writers, since they mentioned it, probably were thinking that maybe it kind of as an at least as an Easter egg, if you will. I wonder.
Mm.
And just for our listeners, if they haven't seen the episode, um, this character Rick is out on a mountainside, kind of alone, and he's sitting there, and in the midst of his just time there in the woods, this satellite falls from the sky and hits him, and then he and the satellite, it hits him with such velocity that the other characters talk about them as though they've merged. That it ends Rick's life, and that, but then like when they arrive on the scene, they look like they're connected, the satellite and Rick. So just for our listeners, in case if they were wondering what we were talking about there. So
Right. This episode seemed to mark an advent of some really dark comedy within the program. There were little elements in the past, but bringing in the casket, and it has antennae coming out from every which way because they could not separate Rick from the satellite, and then with the people unable to resist laughing, it's going to hurt Maggie deeply, but sometimes there are dark moments when you just have to laugh, and they sure did.
could we talk a little bit about Maggie for this part? I was just wondering what your thoughts were after following her story through so many other parts of the show in this area of losing boyfriends. And I guess I'm wondering, did you feel like this storyline was different from any of the others, or is this consistently how she acts? Or maybe you could just speak to Maggie's part for a little bit.
Yeah, actually, all of the previous boyfriends happened before the show started.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just something that's already happened in everyone's life, and everyone is familiar with this string of relationships that she's had. There is a good episode later on where Maggie is turning 30 and is writing letters, and she also has an infection, and so she gets feverish, and she dreams of meeting these boyfriends again, and that's kind of interesting how this kind of reaction and conversation that she has with all of them, and then much later in the series, her mom has a boyfriend and he dies. And they take the spin on it that it's not necessarily that there's an O'Connell curse, or Maggie's last name is O'Connell, but just the fact that they're just inherently strong women, and the men in their lives can't keep up with them, and they're frail, and they're the ones passing away, but out of frailty, not because of a curse. But yeah, this was we see Maggie putting together a diorama, which will come up again later, kind of when she's having some personal time alone, and you see like a skeleton made out of wax that she's kind of arranging, and we will definitely get to another episode where the diorama comes back into play, and actually there's more fusion that happens in that one too, actually, so we'll have to talk about that in that episode in the future. But it's interesting how there's another episode where Maggie is talking with another boyfriend along the way with Mike Monroe, and Maggie's talking about maybe like laws of nature. She says, if you throw an apple in the air and it comes back to ground, to the ground 5 times, or every time, then that's gravity. And if you date someone and they die 5 times, then that's a natural phenomenon as well. And she's worried about whether or not there is this curse or whatnot. And so this is a theme that goes throughout the whole series, and seeing and that every character is well aware of, even these characters who we only see in this very episode. The town is kind of part of the town's consciousness in a way, and people are hoping to cash in, as it were, that we see, and yeah, everyone reacts. Maybe they're, I don't know, maybe they're used to it, maybe they're kind of over it, the way that they had trouble keeping things together at the funeral, and the way that instead of people really kind of sympathizing with her, they're instead hoping that she can help them out of a jam with the two characters that aren't worried about being associated with her, through the middle part of the episode. How did you feel, Ken, about this story, this kind of part of Maggie's story?
Well, the townspeople, I won't say they got over it quickly, but they certainly accept it quickly. The one guy, Gary, I think his name was, shows up at Maggie, and you think it's because he has a good heart and he's there to provide some comfort. No, he's there to say, I think I should get first shot at you, and I'm not worried about what might happen because, I haven't had a whole lot else going on. And then we have the lady, was it in Ruth Ann's store?
Yeah.
Where, she wants Maggie to go ahead and have an affair with her husband because she'd really prefer that he were dead. They're accepting this as such a matter-of-fact thing. And then it can be used for purposes in our own lives here. Again, the dark humor-ish kind of thing, because it is a bit absurd, but it is within how that show presents itself.
I wanted to ask about the prevailing response from most people in the town of superstition, and just essentially believing that there is a curse, and them all kind of just assuming that this is yet another expression of that. And then, Dr. Joel Fleischman comes in and he has a completely different rubric or metric for measuring this and narrative. And so he's trying to be scientific and saying, think about the probability. I mean, if somebody falls asleep on was it an iceberg? Then there's a high probability that they could die. And I guess there's some probability if somebody's on a mountain that they could be hit by a satellite. Even as he's saying it, he's like, but there's still some probability. But he's trying to pull Maggie out of this sense of fatalism, like, oh, I'm just fated to live this way, and everybody I love will, endure the curse, and I'll never be able to have somebody who I won't lose. And it's like, as he's talking, you see everybody in the room like skeptically like staring. And I guess I wonder, I mean, since you both know the show so much better, is it the case that the local culture is much more prone to be a little bit, I don't know what the term would be, maybe tilted towards accepting the supernatural, or to have that kind of worldview that's a little bit more not science-based, but more looking at luck and the idea of curses. Could you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of maybe other instances where something like this, something similar might have happened. I guess maybe in a way, maybe when we see kind of Holling's story, I forget if we have had the chance to talk about him. Yeah, I think in a past episode we talked. There was a time where he was, with the one when he and Ruth Ann were hunting hoping to
birding.
take pictures of birding, and I think that maybe he explained in that episode, or maybe it was a past one, where after hunting all of these animals and being a really renowned, making a real name for himself, he had a dream that he's being chased by all of these animals with guns, And that was kind of what gave him perspective, that he thought that, until all of the animals can be armed, it's not quite fair to go out and hunt them. And so that was kind of his inspiration for switching to film. And maybe that's a similar kind of way of thinking. And the other thought that just came to my mind was there's another episode much later. I think it's at the end of season 5, where Joel finds a mastodon, I believe, or a woolly mammoth. It may be the same thing. That is thawing out of the permafrost, and he is very excited to have the chance to study this. And he finds someone from the paleontology department, at one of the universities, and they come to see it, and it's gone. And another character is, when Joel finds him, is sawing it up and carving it up for meat. He's super excited for these steaks that he's going to cure and have throughout for however many months and months and months of this woolly mammoth meat that you just can't find anywhere else. He's super excited about it. And I wonder if maybe that's kind of also a telling thing about this community, in a way, kind of along the same lines. Could you think of any other examples, Ken?
Yeah, one comes to mind right away, Barney, and it's very much related to this episode. And I'll just say, spoiler alert, in a sense. Rick returns, if you will recall later. He does not return as a human, and I won't go into all of, because it's special when you see it, especially you, Jacob. But Rick does return in a sense, and it is another moment where once that feels like a reality to Maggie and to others, it's fine within the context of this show, that this is happening. So yeah, it's a thread, no doubt.
Yeah, and then I was thinking about that earlier today, and when you bring that up in relationship to this, everyone accepting, what Rick is or Maggie thinks he is, then and then that also makes me think of One Who Waits, who will I know we'll watch some of those episodes. Ed has a spiritual guide that no one else can see, and it's an ancient ancestor, One Who Waits, and everyone is pretty much, except for Joel, is thinking, oh yeah, it's just One Who Waits, and he likes to order food just to smell it, because he makes him think about how food used to be. And so I think we really do see the community really accepting of and believing in and giving space for this kind of superstition, or maybe supernatural, or things that that maybe from various different cultures or ideas might come up in their the course of their living there together.
Right. Yeah, and there's good versus evil as well. There's another time where the devilish person comes, and again, it's accepted as in, why not? Why would he not necessarily be that? Yeah. Good questions.
Do we want to talk a little further about Joel's efforts to comfort Maggie? I know he's the bearer of the news that her boyfriend is dead, and he's really struggling to convey that to her, because just the night before he was very critical of her, and he can tell she's hurting, and he just can't think of a way to tell her this news. So he offers a joke, and in the joke, there's this example of somebody saying, "Oh, your cat went up on the roof and it slipped and it fell and it died," and is a way of telling the owner that something bad's happened. And then the same thing that happens to the owner's grandmother, and they said, "Well, your grandmother went up on the roof," and so then Joel goes ahead and he uses the joke to tell Maggie about her boyfriend. But you see in him this desire to help her and encourage her, even like we mentioned earlier, being maybe one of the only people in the town to say, this curse is ridiculous. Don't buy into this. And he's trying to pull her out of that place. He said, I don't like to see you like this. I don't get the wrong idea, but I don't like to see you like this. And so I don't know. I thought that I really appreciated Joel's efforts, and even as imperfect as they were at times, to try to be there for her. So I don't know if that strikes a chord with either of you, or if that's consistent with how he is at other points in the season, but it seemed like he was really working hard to me in this episode to help her out.
Mm-hmm. It's certainly consistent within the program. Joel, of course, makes horrible human relations mistakes constantly. But yet in this particular episode, he certainly gave some thought to the way he was going to say it once he was compelled to be the bearer of the news. He obviously gave it some thought and did the best he could. And his compassion at the very end of the show, which in the last scene, which certainly helps to generate the title for the episode, not only his compassion, but to dance with Maggie, shows true affection. And I thought that was admirably done.
Can you unpack a little bit more how the title, The Last Dance, relates to their dance together, or the people around them dancing? I was thinking about that because, we talked earlier about the satellite and Rick. There is a very somber ending for human life in this episode, but it's at the same time, like, life goes on for them, other people. But then, at the beginning, we hear about the dinosaurs going extinct from the meteor that hits the dinosaurs. And there's this sense of and then we already mentioned the sci-fi references to these, I don't know, robotic entities. Like, there's a sense of kind of impending, I don't know if you want to say impending doom, but a kind of a sense of things are coming to a close. But then yet there's still like a sense of humor and like life going on in the episode amidst all of that. So is The Last Dance, is it a reference to the song that was played? Is it a reference to kind of the closing of the remembrance of the boyfriend? Or is it because it's the last scene in the show? I just wonder if you could unpack a little bit for me.
Right. Well, first, it's slow dance. Sorry, Jacob.
Oh, it's slow dance. Okay.
And to me, and this may be an oversimplification, to dance slow means generally you're going to have some human physical contact with the partner involved, as opposed to a faster dance where there's going to be a separation. And as the scene unfolds, you get to see Joel and Maggie doing the slow dance. You get to see Eric and Rick doing the slow dance. You also, just as a corner shot, you see Maurice and you see Chris with his arm around Maurice at that moment. And I found that to be very meaningful too. And they were doing their own little slow dance. As far as the music, it's a wonderful Etta James song, At Last. Boy, way to go, writers. Yes, I believe it has lots to do with what unfolded there. Barney, I'm sure you have a...
Oh, yeah. That last scene is great. And we do kind of see the town reacting, where people are kind of thinking, not really like shrugging their shoulders, but thinking, oh, okay, why not? This is a good song. Let's dance to this song too. And Holling and Shelley get in, and I like the shot of Maurice when Ron and Eric decide to dance together, because Maurice is finally feeling okay with this decision, and now here he is coming to reality again. He's having to accept, if he accepts one thing, he has to accept everything, and it's kind of grating against him a little bit. And I like how the camera is kind of dancing. in the scene, you can see that the camera is it's not still. It's kind of bobbing around as if the person holding the camera is also dancing together, and kind of piggybacking on what Jacob said about kind of a celebration of life. This song is the song for weddings. We even played it at our reception.
Ah,
Yeah, and yeah, so celebrating life for sure. Thinking about marriage and creating new life and whatnot, and bringing people together and bringing the community back together with this song too. And yeah, I appreciated that Joel was the one who reached out to Maggie, because a lot of the time we see that Joel is kind of Joel and Maggie have a strained relationship at times, for one reason or another. And I loved what Jacob said, how he picked up on the fact that just the night before he was kind of being critical toward her. Yeah, I mean, he really what happened to Rick, he kind of took it personally himself and is wondering, I better watch myself with the medical level of medical care I give to this woman, because she might report me to the AMA or something, and yeah, and then that joke, oh man, the way he delivers that joke is so good. It's one of my favorite moments. But yeah, trying to and I like how Maggie appreciates, hey, that's really a good joke, Fleischman, and then he has to break it in the news story, and he admits that he didn't do such a good job, he says, of telling her the news, but in such a situation, it's hard to really kind of explain exactly what happened to Rick. But about the idea of dancing, and maybe what the title is about, slow dance, I wonder if maybe one other thought that came to my mind is kind of the phrase that we have where we dance around things, where we dance around an issue. And I wonder if maybe that's also part of it, especially thinking of the Maurice and Ron and Eric story, if they're kind of dancing around something, Maurice is trying to dance around how he feels about having them there and whatnot. But I wonder if it's again kind of thinking of the maybe the intentional, or maybe we're just reading into things message of the day that the earth stood still, meaning if maybe the writers are wondering if we're dancing around the issue of homosexuality or not in society at that time. And I don't know if that's another part of why they chose slow dance as the idea of the title or not, but for sure, yeah. I mean, the end scene, we see slow dance as a very apropos, very, very appropriate title.
Well, I think they did. I think they did reference back. One thing we don't ever know, guys, is the sequence of shots. There's a good possibility that final dancing scene was shot after Chris talked about the day the earth stood still. We're not privy to those things, but I think, to me, the connection is clear and plain. Jacob, how do you see all this?
Well, I like how you both have unpacked it from your perspectives, and I really like what you're saying, and that's helpful. Could you relate the slow dance part of the story to like Holling and what's going on there in his relationship? Because I was kind of troubled. I mean, maybe troubled's the wrong word, but I was kind of surprised that they made the story choice that they did with how that was resolved. I don't know if you were or not, but I mean, his main love interest there is like upset because they don't talk very much. And then it's kind of resolved by him telling her that, well, I primarily like you for your body. And and I don't know, maybe it's a silly moment. We kind of laugh because she seems to appreciate that answer, but she's actually on to something when she's upset with him because, he has this former friend come and they're having a great conversation and enjoying each other's company. And I think that is an important, I mean, maybe I'm sounding judgmental here, but it seems like it's a pretty valid and important part of a relationship is to enjoy somebody else for their mind. So I don't know. Maybe you guys understand the humor of the show much better than I do. So maybe that was meant to be like just a humorous element. But could you speak to that part of the story? And was that all resolved by the point of the slow dance, do you think?
Yeah, as awkward as it seems, and I was surprised too, Jacob, having not seen the episode a while, that the resolution was that little conversation about "I want you for your body." But I still think they were pulled apart, and they were put back together. They were drawn closer, and so that fits the rest. I don't know. I'm trying to play writer and producer here. And let's make it funny as well. It still surprises me that it wasn't more tender.
Yeah, it's a good point. That yeah, they should probably have more depth to the relationship. And when Anita, Holling's friend of 40 years, when they're chatting and says, "Oh, she looks just like you," and then he says, "No, this is my almost wife," and maybe especially this is just season 2, so maybe we're still just kind of getting into this kind of fresh relationship that they have together. Things really do deepen a lot for them later. I'm thinking of the end of another episode where Shelley says to Holling, she says, "From now on, I'm making you young." So they do develop a real bond that goes beyond just "I love you for your body," and yeah, I do think that it must be tricky in their case where they live together, they work together, they see each other all the time, so it is kind of hard. And then they don't really, their age difference, and he's from Quebec and she's from Saskatchewan, so how could they ever get along? And and but I think that it is kind of fun in the whole series that we can see them develop their relationship and find some mutuality, find some foundation to this relationship that I think we get the notion that it's still pretty fresh at the beginning of the episode. I think, or of the series. I think that even I think it's even the pilot where Holling and Maurice are fighting about Shelley, and Maurice says that if he ever sees Holling again, he's going to shoot him. And so I think that at the very, very beginning of the whole series, Holling and Shelley are just now together. So maybe this is kind of to remind us that their relationship is still fresh. But thankfully, the writers didn't just leave it there, and we see them growing together as a couple throughout the whole series.
What did you think of that interaction when Shelley goes into the store and she's looking for books that will help her relate to Holling, books from the 50s, she's asking for. What is the shop owner's name again? I'm trying to remember.
Ruth Ann.
Ruth Ann. When she notices Ruth Ann's hair, she says, "Oh, how did you do that to your hair?" And she says, "Well, I'm aging, Shelley." And what a moment that you rarely see in television, where somebody younger is admiring the beauty of somebody who's older. And I just kind of wonder about Shelley's character. Like, seems like she kind of longs to be older, to be kind of closer to Holling in a way. At least in this episode, I'm sensing that. And he kind of longs to be younger. He says, "I'm drawn to your youth." And somehow, I guess, in their respective longing, they meet in the middle. But I thought that was a really interesting exchange where she talked about Ruth Ann's hair.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Jacob. It was really a moment for Shelley also to be shown to have some depth of person. And Barney, your point is very well taken, that to remind us that we are early in in the show, and they will develop relationship wise and human wise.
Yeah, I like too the fact that about Shelley's character here that after there's that scene where Holling and Anita are talking at the corners at the left and right side of the screen, and Shelley's in the middle. And then when Shelley is trying her best to kind of fit in and be a part of the conversation just because she wants to be a part of Holling's life, and then they're talking about the celebration and the party that happened all throughout Alaska when it became the 50th state, 49th state, and then she does her best to kind of join in by talking about this major party that they had, and then we see Holling and Anita pull off the screen, and then Shelley's just left alone, and she doesn't give up though. She doesn't get mad. She doesn't pout. Then she tries to again meet Holling where he is and trying to find a way to add some depth to their relationship and find something that they can talk about, wanting to add this new layer to their relationship. And after that doesn't work though, then she really kind of takes it personally, because he doesn't seem to be, I mean, it was midnight when she's wanting him to eat hot dog cheese casserole, but and talk about these really the Rosenbergs or whatever, these really 1950s topics, and that he may not have been so aware of where he was at the time, but then she really takes it personally that he wasn't acknowledging this effort that she's making. And I like that about her character, because I think she's 19 or 20 or so. I mean, it's even a few seasons later where she says, it's actually the episode where Maggie turns 30, where Shelley says, "Boy, I'm almost 21 and I don't know what to do with my life." And so I think it shows a lot of depth, a lot of maturity in a way for her character that maybe we don't necessarily expect to see. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't pay off right away, but we do see how she grows in different ways throughout the series, I think. But this is a fun way that they wrote that for her, I think.
Are there any other questions or thoughts that either of you have before we would close our time?
I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. And then we would just like to thank you again for joining us on our look at today's episode. It was I think the ninth episode of season 2, called Slow Dance. And we hope that if you have the chance to look at these episodes somehow, that you'll maybe want to and think about some of the issues that they bring up. Maybe you're aware of some of the other things that were happening at the time, or that are mentioned throughout the episode, like the day the Earth stood still and whatnot. And maybe take that interest of yours and see how it is shown with this episode. And we always appreciate you for sticking with us, and that you listen regularly, or maybe it's your first time, and we hope that you'll want to listen or watch together with us again on this Two-World podcast. And for myself, for Barney and Jacob, and for Ken, we are happy to have you along and hope that you're looking forward to our next show as much as we are. And we'll see you then.